This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're still in the first hour of this live broadcast. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Again, the breaking story today, which we are covering closely, is the rising tension in the Middle East. And again, we'll go to our source right now from the news feeds. U.S. officials have told numerous news agencies, including CBS News in the United States, that Iran is ready for a counterstrike on Israel, expected within hours. Hundreds of drones, dozens of missiles could rain down on Israel over this weekend. It is uncertain whether this will happen right now in 24 hours, 48 hours. It could even happen next week. But the point is, the region, in fact, the world, is on high alert right now. We just spoke to Maryam Susli, aka Syrian Girl, to get her take on it. And again, we'll drop her op-ed with Al Mayadeen in the TNT chat community, so you guys can check that out and read that for yourself. Right now, however, I want to bring on to the call award-winning journalist Yousef Mawry, who's joining us right now from Yemen to weigh in on this important story. Yousef, thank you very much for coming on.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. So,
Yousef, let's just break this down. Where are we right now with this story? And what do you see in terms of tension, in terms of escalation? What do you see happening over the next week? Is there a chance to dial this down? If so, what needs to happen? Your thoughts?
Well, I think something that really stands out is that Iranian Islamic religious leader, Sayyid Khomeini, he came out and he said that Iran would respond back and that Israel would be slapped in the face and would suffer consequences for its attack on the consulate, the Iranian consulate in Damascus. So that's the first time I've heard the spiritual leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution issue such a statement. Taking into consideration the tensions, the rising tensions that have unfolded over the past week and a half, I think it's very clear to the West, to Israel, and to the rest of the world that an Iranian strike on Israel, it's not just going to be a strike carried out only by Iran. This will be an Iranian strike, which is going to be launched from places like Yemen, from Palestine, from Lebanon, from Syria, and from Iraq. So the flood of Al-Aqsa, the operation that launched on October 7th, it seems like it's turning into a tsunami. Because when you have all these factions in the Middle East, especially in Yemen, they've managed to successfully weaken the strength, the brute domination of Western Israeli imperialism over the Middle East. I think it's no secret that Israel has been trying to provoke Iran for decades. I remember, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, Israel trying to provoke a war with Iran. And obviously they're pushing the West, their Western allies, with the U.S., because they know that the U.S. and the British and the other Western nations, they will be at the forefront. They'll be at the vanguard to attack Iran. So, but that plan is not going as smoothly as Israel has hoped for, because I think when Israel was planning to provoke a war with Iran and gather its troops, its allies to wage this military attack on Iran, I don't think they were expecting that allies of Iran in Yemen would be able to take over or to limit access to Western powers in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aden, and in the Indian Sea, the Arabian Sea, because these are strategic waterways. These are strategic seas that the U.S., Israel, and the British government need access to, and they need the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in order for them to carry out any type of successful military operation against Iran. If they are cut off from the Red Sea, from the Gulf of Aden, from Bab el-Mandeb, it's going to make their military operations a lot harder, because now you're losing logistics, you're losing maritime traffic. You no longer have access. It's no longer easy to transport weapons on a massive scale through the Red Sea. So that's going to be a huge inconvenience for a long type of military confrontation with Iran. And not to mention, Israel has failed to eliminate Hamas in occupied Palestine, in the besieged Gaza Strip. So if it's becoming very clear to the world that Israel is losing, because we see videos every single day of Hamas posting where they're basically eliminating Israeli soldiers, tanks, armored vehicles. And this is something that seems to be happening on a daily basis in the midst of, just carpet bombing an entire city. So now add Iran into the equation. If you can't even get rid of Hamas in the besieged Gaza Strip, and you lost the 2006 war against Lebanon's Hezbollah, now these forces are all going to join together for an attack on Israel. And I think I don't think this was in accordance to Israel's original plan with regards to a military confrontation with Iran. I think they were expecting that the majority of the Arab and the Middle Eastern countries would side with Iran, and that is the case, believe it or not, as we know. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the case now as it was before, but we still do have Saudi Arabia, countries like the UAE, Jordan, and even Egypt. Although they've issued public statements in condemnation of Israel, if it came to a large-scale full war with Iran, these Arab proxy regimes would side with the U.S. and would side with Israel. But I think it's sort of a balance between the two axes as we speak, because Iran has Yemen, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and they've proven that they're able to deliver devastating blows.
Certainly, yes. Whether Saudi Arabia would want to side with Israel and the U.S., they would pretty much be pinned down by Yemen. That's pretty clear after 9 years of this war that's ended in a catastrophic failure for Saudi Arabia in the U.S. But let me ask you this, Yousef. Clearly, it seems like you made the case that Israel's losing the war in Gaza, much to the chagrin of everybody that's been saying the opposite of that they've been winning, that Hamas is totally defeated, and all these various announcements that the IDF withdrawing from Gaza, then they're back in northern Gaza, then out, then into the south, and back in the north. So playing this chess game with the press, with the United States. But the reality is, if they are losing, then don't they have an incentive to create a provocation to draw the United States into a direct confrontation with Iran? Because that would make life a lot easier, wouldn't it, for Israel in the current predicament that they're in? And isn't that the big danger here? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with you. The U.S. is in a very bad situation. They're in between a rock and a hard place. And the reason for that is because of the very reasons that you've articulated.
Okay.
1,000. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Yousef. We lost you for a moment.
So the only thing they've succeeded in Gaza is just killing almost 40,000 innocent civilians. So yes, I think everybody knows that Israel is trying to drag Iran into the war. But just because those are the intentions of Israel, it doesn't mean that just because Israel wants to provoke a war with Iran, or that it wants to drag Iran into a war so that it could spark a regional war, that is just going to sit back and allow its sovereignty to be violated. I think it's taken the step forward to say to Israel, okay, if this is what you want, if you want war, then war is what you will get, because the strategy of just being reluctant to strike back, keeping in mind that Israel, Mossad has been waging these assassinations, on high-ranking Iranian military officials across the Middle East. They've done this a number of times. They did this with Qasem Soleimani. They did this with a number of other high-ranking Iranian officials, and Iran has sat back and been patient because they know that Iran, they know that Israel wants to spark a war between Iran and the U.S. because the U.S. is just not the U.S. is not going to allow Iran to destroy to destroy Israel or to destroy the Israeli regime, the IDF. So that's the bad situation, the bad position that the U.S. is in, because the U.S. is just unable to break free from the global Zionist lobby control. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense when you think about it realistically. How is it that the U.S., the beacon, so-called beacon democracy, the country that, the people, they choose their own political affairs, the people they choose which, if their military should engage in a war. How is
Hold on for a minute.
but not only can
You're breaking up a little bit there, Yousef. Go ahead.
it's just mind-boggling when you see that Israel's committing genocide, and at the same time dragging the Americans into perhaps what would be the biggest war, one of the biggest wars in American history with Iran. Because a war with Iran it's not just going to be a war with Iran; it's going to be a war with Yemen, with Lebanon, with Iraq, and with other Muslim factions across the Middle East. And I can tell you now, just from putting the ear to the ground and just getting the general vibe of Yemeni and other Arabs would tell you the same thing. Iran is growing very popular. Iran is starting, their cause is starting to make sense to even those who were against Iran. I'm talking about those even in some of the Gulf countries, because they're starting to see that Iran, if they're able to actually wage a direct attack on Israel, then Iran is cashing the check that they've written. It's delivering on the promise that they promised they would deliver on if their sovereignty is attacked. Because some Arab regimes and some of the Arab people, they're constantly saying that Iran is not serious. Iran is not going to attack. Iran is
Yeah. Well, they'll say that, but Iran has acted previously, and the U.S. has not responded to those actions because they couldn't strategically. So yeah, I mean, let me ask you this, Yousef. If Iran was to choose a high value target within Israel, or more than one high value target, what do you think that might be? Would they opt for a military target, or would they opt for an infrastructure target or something like this? What do you think the thinking would be in terms of the quid pro quo?
I think Iran is preparing for a long-term war with Israel. And we can base that just from the inception of the Islamic Republic of Iran, their revolution. It was launched and it was established specifically for the purpose of liberating the land of Al-Aqsa, liberating Palestine from Israeli occupation. That's basically the gel that keeps this whole Iranian activism across the Middle East. And not only that, they launched their revolution to also, with the goal of eliminating the U.S. military and political dominance over the Muslim world, right? And also their third objective is to unite the Muslim world to unite the Muslim world economy, political, military positions in global affairs. Now, in order for them to achieve that third goal, the first thing that they have to do, and they realize this is part of their manifesto, the first thing they had to do is establish allies in the region, establish allies that are able to share the same cause, the same sentiments, and the same long-term goals. And Iran came with the sentiment of liberating the land of Palestine, and that's a sentiment and a belief and a goal of every Muslim across not just the Middle East, but across the Muslim world, because they believe Palestine is a land being illegally occupied by the Israeli regime. They're being backed by the U.S., by the British government, and it is the Islamic obligation, the humanitarian obligation of the Muslim world to unite to bring an end to this imminent threat, also because it's the third holiest Muslim site. So it becomes a dear goal and a sentiment to every Muslim. And this was the message that resonated with the Muslim world upon the establishment of the Islamic Iranian Revolution in 1979. And now we're starting to see the allies of Iran, ones here in Yemen, Lebanon, and other parts of the Middle East, they're starting to act militarily. And that's something that's new. It's a new phenomenon for Muslims to see other Muslim countries, other Muslim factions take a stance to defend Palestine, to defend the Palestinians, and to defend Muslims' holy sites. When you add to the mix that these attacks, in the Red Sea, these military operations from factions in Syria and Iraq have been successful and have attacked Israeli military sites inside of Israel, it's only adding more fuel to the fire in terms of more Muslims and perhaps even more factions in the near future joining this so-called axis of resistance and joining allies with Iran. Now, to answer your question directly, where is Iran going to attack? I think what would make sense for a military operation is first and foremost they need to clear the Golan Heights from Israeli presence, from Israeli forces, because if they're able to clear the Golan Heights from military presence and Israeli forces, what that does is it opens a corridor into the heart of occupied Palestine. Basically, Iran and its allies would then be able to actually send military troops to confront the Israeli regime through military mobilization on the ground, through access points, through the access points in Syria, through the Golan Heights. There's a reason why the Golan Heights has been occupied by Israel for many years. It's because if they don't have control of the Golan Heights, then you basically, that leaves Israel susceptible to a military invasion by the Muslim world through Syria.
Right. So strategically, and that's notable, Yousef, that Russia has moved forces in 2 battalions, I believe, into the Golan Heights, or multiple battalions into the Golan Heights just in the last few weeks. So that's a significant move. Perhaps Russia did this in anticipation of something very much a scenario like what you're seeing now. It's well known or understood that Russia and Iran are allies. So that could change the calculus as well. Certainly that would also draw the attention and the efforts of the United States into possibly a confrontation with Russia, but incredibly sensitive. I know we only got a couple of minutes left, Yousef. First of all, I want to get your comment on Russia's presence in Syria, how that factors in. And I want to talk about the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, as you mentioned before, absolutely crucial, and the exchanges between Ansar Allah, the Yemeni forces, and the U.S. and the British and French and the other sort of European naval powers in there. What has happened over the last couple of months? What sort of blows have been dealt to the U.S. and Israel and its allies in terms of that waterway, that key waterway, which you just described. But yeah, just before we go, Russia and Syria, and how did Ansarullah fare against the Western naval forces? Go ahead, Yousef.
But just like we've seen Russia's role in this, in the war that was launched against the Assad regime from 2011 for 12 years. Russia maintained a presence in Syria because they understood the game. They understood that this was an Israeli-U.S. plot in order to overthrow the Assad regime and replace that regime with an Israeli U.S.-backed regime that would weaken the position, be installed in power, be given weapons, just like the Israeli regime is receiving billions and billions of weaponry aid from the U.S. If the Assad regime collapsed and you had a new government, Western-backed government installed in Syria, it would greatly weaken Russia's role, Russia's strength and influence, not just in the perhaps in Syria, but across the world. It would also weaken directly Iran, the axis of resistance, and Hezbollah, and the Hamas and Palestinian resistance, because Syria is how, it's the main corridor where weapons are being transported or smuggled into Palestinian resistance fighters and to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So that's, in short, that's why this so-called revolution erupted in Syria. It's not even a revolution; it was a Western plot, as we see has been proven empirically. So that's why Russia stepped in to prevent that from happening, because they know that Syria would have been used to attack perhaps Russia, to attack Iranian interests, and it basically would have eliminated any potential threat against Israel. And like I said before, if you're able to take control of the Golan Heights while still under the Assad regime, who was allied with Russia, allied with the axis of resistance, then you would have Yemeni fighters and fighters from the whole of the Muslim world feeling it is necessary to go there and to protect Palestinians. And through the Golan Heights, they would have access to do just that. If the situation is to escalate, if genocide continues, any Muslim will tell you, whether Sunni or Shi'i, that if they had the access to go and help the Palestinians in any way that they can, they just need access. And that's the danger that Syria represents for the Israeli regime, is if the Golan Heights is no longer under Israeli control, then you would have a flood of fighters from the axis of resistance and from across the Muslim world taking part in such military action, especially while the genocide is taking place. And Russia would have no problem with that. Because considering the alternative, it's definitely in Russia's best interest for them to step in any way that they can to prevent Israel or the U.S. or the British from gaining strategic grounds in Syria, just like they're doing with Ukraine. Likewise, Russia would be able to turn the table and do the same thing to the U.S. and Israel through Syria. To answer your second question with Bab al-Mandab, this is the one. This is the one card. This is the play, the strategic play that we are seeing unfold that Israel and the West did not see coming. They never expected that their ships, their maritime tracks would be targeted in the Red Sea, let alone the Gulf of Aden. And what this has done is, in point blank, it has forced the U.S., it has forced Israel to reshuffle and to rethink their military strategy on a potential scale past Iran, because they're not going to be able to do that if Bab al-Mandab is closed, if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and if the Strait of the Suez Canal is also closed from access to Western powers.
Yousef Mawry, award-winning journalist from Yemen, thank you very much for your commentary and your insights on this. Very valuable. We really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on TNT this week.
Thank you, Patrick. Take care.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Yousef Mawry, fantastic analysis, top of the hour news headlines coming up. And when we come back, more on the other side with Sam Husseini.